And the topic of the show is mindful or mindful. We're joined again in the studio by a young person. This time it's Bashira. Bashira was here last week along with Sana and Amira. And mashallah did an amazing job at really sort of unpicking social media. We had a great show last week, brilliant feedback from some of the adults as well. And hopefully we'll have another show that's just as entertaining and insightful. So I'm not going to talk too much in terms of an intro because, again, we have got more young people joining us today. So we've got Bashir in the studio, Amira and Sana, who were here last week. Assalamu alaikum, girls.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
How are you feeling today?
I'm a bit nervous.
We'll be fine. We're all a little bit nervous when we start. And then joining the girls, alhamdulillah, I'm so pleased to introduce Dahir, Owen and Galeem. So Dahir, if you just want to do a quick intro and tell us how old you are and why do you think this is an important topic?
Assalamu alaikum, my name's Dahir. I'm 14 and I think that we need to speak up about mental health so people can learn how to deal with it and what to do to help learn to improve their relationship with people.
Wonderful. I love that answer. And it's really important that young people recognise this. We've got Galeem waiting in the waiting room. Akil? Okay. Sorry, just bear with us. Akil, I think we've got Galeem waiting in the waiting room. Akil, we've got Galeem waiting in the waiting room. Can we just add him into the show? Okay, apologies about that. So we have got Galeem as well, another young person, and repping for the boys along with Dahir when we talk about mental health. Assalamu alaikum, Galeem, are you there?
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, salam. How are you today?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Can you hear me? I'm good, alhamdulillah. You?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, not too bad. Okay, brilliant. So we've got 5 young people and a special guest this afternoon as well. We have got a very, I'd like to say, a long-time family friend and an amazing human being all around, alhamdulillah, Shazib Aziz, who is a local primary school teacher and a long-time advocate for supporting the development of children and young people. He's got over 20 years of experience working in the field and pretty much, I mean, we had a conversation this morning. He's seen it all. I mean, he's seen how quickly the world has changed for young people and how much certain issues are affecting their mental health. Shazib is joining us today and hopefully will contribute to the discussions, but more just listening in on the conversations you guys are having. He's also launched a new venture called Right Direction. It's a youth mentoring program which is deeply rooted in Islamic principles, something that's really exciting and much needed, especially in Leicester. Assalamu alaikum, Shazib. How are you?
Walaikum salam. Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you, Nabillah?
Yeah,
okay?
Not too bad, thank you. A little bit of a bumpy start, but here we are. Let's crack on.
We'll get there, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So tell us a bit more about the mentoring program. You know, what's the ethos and how do you imagine it all working?
Okay. So Right Direction has been set up because what we've realized is within the younger generation of Muslims, there's been a disconnection to the Islamic establishments. And especially when they go to madrasa, there's a cultural barrier, there's a language barrier. And because of that, children are no longer finding those institutions relatable or approachable. So Right Direction is here as sort of the middleman and to create a point where young people can ask the questions they want, have those conversations that they need for clarification, for purpose and for direction.
Brilliant. And so in your opinion, why is it more important now than ever before?
Okay. I think it's so important now because the challenges the young people are facing today are completely different to the challenges we faced in my generation. So now we're living in a virtual world and now social media is prevalent. We didn't have that growing up. And so there's a lot more challenges that they're facing and nobody's taught them how to use it. Nobody's taught them the reality of social media and things like, and the expectations that they put on themselves as well. So that's why it's so important that we have these conversations and talk about these things from an Islamic perspective.
Brilliant. No, you're not wrong there. I mean, we spoke about this last week. It's such a complicated world and social media just a whole new dimension. We know mental health problems are very common. And when we're looking at low-level mental health, it's very real that at least, and I say at least because this is a very general statistic, 1 in 10 young people will experience mental health difficulties at some point in their young life. Yeah. And actually, you know, we know later on in life that statistic is like 1 in 4 adults. So it's a worrying thing, and particularly from a sort of Muslim community perspective. You're right. You're absolutely right. We need to start talking about this, and I think this is the purpose of this conversation today. Let's start hearing about this from the perspective of the young people that we've got in the studio, but also to all our young listeners and also parents listening at home, please do engage in the conversation. I mean, it was great to have the comments in last week. It really encourages the young people that are on the show. It's brilliant for them. So if you can text in on 0774 8855055, and if you are listening, share the link with your family and friends and anyone that you think might benefit from this. We are streaming live on all the social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and all the other ones that are there. So yeah, please do share the link with them so they can listen in. So okay, let's start the conversation. Bashira, you're in the studio, so you're in the hot seat at the moment. We'll start with you. How would you describe mental health? What are the first things that kind of come in your head when you think about it?
When you say mental health, I think of like just pain. In that sense, because like I suffer from mental health issues myself.
Wow. Okay.
And it's not easy. It's difficult. It's a difficult thing to live with. It's a difficult thing to deal with. So yeah.
Pain.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Bit dark, but yeah.
No, not at all. And you know what? You're so brave. Thank you. You know, it takes a big, strong, confident person to come to that admission. I really admire you. Thank you so much. Sana, so what do you think about when you think of mental health? How would you define it?
I think mental health is figuring out what makes you feel anxious, what makes you feel angry, what makes you feel good, and being able to just be able to roll with it and understand how certain situations you're put in could affect your mood and how you feel.
Lovely. That's very much about reflection, isn't it? Knowing what your triggers are. Dahir, have you got anything to add to that?
I think when it comes to mental health, mainly people focus on negative associations. But if we talk about positive mental health, maybe people will focus on positives. It sounds obvious, but I think if we all talk about the good side, it will help us become more positive.
Wow, look at this, all these different perspectives, you know, it's amazing. And you're not wrong, actually. And hopefully, throughout the show, we will start unpicking some of the things that we can do to really help our mental health and well-being overall. And hopefully you guys can contribute to that conversation. Galeem, did you want to add anything else onto that, just as a bit of an introduction? Mental health, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Yeah, so mental health is like a state of mind, and every person has mental health. Some people have positive mental health, some have poor mental health, and it can change like whatever situation you're in and change at any time.
Wow. Do you know, I'm sitting here smiling to myself, spot on. Honestly, everyone has mental health. That's the one thing we kind of forget, especially when we are trying to support other people who might be going through a bit of a rough time, and sometimes not recognizing that could be us in a few weeks, months, or years' time. You know, it changes all the while. Thank you so much for that insight. Amira, so there's been a mention of like feeling stressed and anxious, understanding what the triggers are. What kind of things in terms of the physical symptoms might young people experience when they're feeling anxious, bearing in mind that sometimes you don't know it's anxiety, but what are some of the things you might start feeling? Any thoughts?
Well, it's obvious, like nail biting and just like feeling really sweaty and panicked about certain things, and like just feeling stressed and overworked. You don't really know that that is because you are that you are feeling anxious.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and that just sort of highlights how closely linked our physical mental health are. You know, the reality is that sometimes something going on in your mind, when your mind is very full, can manifest, and there's some really obvious symptoms that can start to show. You know, working with young people, there's a whole range of things that they say about, you know, having frequent headaches. You know, they might feel nervous and twitchy, which you've said, you know, about biting nails, shaking, breathing difficulties. You know, sometimes anxiety can really put people in a difficult position where it actually manifests into a full-blown panic attack. And those it can be quite scary for that person going through that, very traumatic. Butterflies, and that's like the first thing. Sometimes you might just feel this little butterfly feeling in your tummy, and all of a sudden it sort of goes from one thing to another, and you feel quite overwhelmed. So really, just highlighting again that there's a real link between physical and mental health. Shazib, I just want to bring you in on this one. I mean, you have been working with children and young people for a long time. You're a primary school teacher. What kind of things do you see when you what are you looking out for when you think someone might be experiencing a dip in their mental health?
Well, within the school setting, you're looking at things that a child might be withdrawn. They may be, and you may see them having difficulty building relationships with other children, or sometimes you might have the opposite, where they're completely hyperactive and they're trying to put on a front to show that everything's okay. And so that's why it's so important that young people have somebody else that they can confide in, somebody that they can go to. Because otherwise, if they don't address that, or even and that's a skill in itself, of being able to identify these feelings within themselves, to know that there is something there that they need to address. Yeah, no, you're right there. Whilst I've just got you, we've had a comment come through from, it doesn't say, but just reading as it is, I applaud the work done by Right Direction, but please consider that most madrasa teachers are local graduates and there is little to no language or cultural barriers. There are barriers such as education in the field of mental health, mentoring and counselling, and these should be addressed. And, really appreciate those kind of comments. No way, is Right Direction trying to override the work that's been done by masjids. We had a conversation earlier today, really recognising that we've moved leaps and bounds in terms of, supporting young people. But did you just want to comment on that one? Yeah, do you know what? I'm not slating there are madrasas that have become more progressive and adapted with the times, and I think they're role models for other madrasas, and they can 100%. Use that. And what Right Direction doing is supplementary to madrasa, so it's not taking over madrasa. Madrasa has its place, and I think all children need that formal Islamic education, but this is something supplementing them and teaching them the skills of how to take that knowledge, adapt it in their everyday life, and living. And that's the thing, being a Muslim, it's not just 5 times a day, it's living as a Muslim. Absolutely. It's in everything interaction that you have. It's something you need to do. Yeah, no, you're right. And just to sort of add on, I mean, the madrasas are doing a great job, and sometimes it's just about finding the time and space to have these meaningful conversations. Exactly. The 5 to 7 might not fit because there's a load of other things that parents want their children to be well clued up with. But you made a really good point. It's really important for young people to connect and have conversations. So let's bring in Galeem. Okay, I'm going to ask you a true or false question, and just tell me your initial thoughts. Okay, so the statement is, most young people say that they can talk to their friends about their mental health problems. Do you think this is true or false?
I think it's true for most young people, but it does depend on your friendship group, yourself, and your upbringing. For me, I have a special connection with my friends that's unique, and I feel as if they're someone that is quite relatable to me. And so I'm open to talk to them about sensitive topics because they are extremely understanding and just get me. Mashallah.
Just by speaking to you, you can tell that there's a level of maturity in how you approach this, and the fact that you're willing to take part in this conversation. And it's great. It's great that you've got that support network out there. And I really do hope that more young people can recognise that there are some friends that they can connect with and talk to in that way. Bashira, what about you? I mean, you're someone living with mental health, which we've just learnt today. How easy is it for you to talk to your friends about what you're going through?
I think it's quite easy. Like, my friends get my issues, I get theirs. We have conversations like this quite regularly, quite frequently. If you're having a particularly bad day, we'll talk about it. It's a good place to say how you're feeling, because they're your age. They get it more than other people can. Wow. Because they understand you. And then they also understand the issues that you have as well. I think it's quite easy to
Excellent. Well, I wasn't expecting this, because according to one of the studies that was carried out, most young people find it very difficult, and obviously that contradicts what you guys are saying, but some people find it very difficult to talk to their peers about it because of the way that their friends might view them, about the stigma that's associated with that. Amira, do you have some views on this? Maybe not you yourself, but do you know people who probably would struggle to talk to their friends about the mental health issues?
Definitely. Especially at my age, I think that there are a lot of people that don't. There's this. I don't know. Mental health can be seen negatively and can reflect on you negatively as a person. Obviously, that's obviously people that aren't educated. But I can see that people would feel embarrassed maybe to talk to their friends about it because they don't want their friends to see a vulnerable side to them.
And
And
that
I think
vulnerability,
that's a very real feeling.
100%. That vulnerability it's probably one of the biggest things what stops people talking. And even in the adult world, I mean, I don't think we're particularly great at it sometimes when we're going through life difficulties and having to share that and expose our vulnerability. But a lot of the time, young people do describe this stigma as feeling quite isolated when they can't talk to someone, ashamed, perhaps misunderstood. But also, the risk of being criticised, like, oh, well, you're not doing this, that's why this is happening, and oversimplifying it. I can see Bashir is nodding in the studio, but it seems like that's quite a common thing then.
Yeah, it can be quite a common thing that people you're doing this, so maybe that's what's causing it. You're not going about it like this way, you're going about it like this way, kind of change what you're doing.
And that's not helpful for that person going through it. It's not uncommon for us to hear things from young people saying, I kept my feelings to myself because a lot of the time I was scared about the reaction that other young people or adults around me might have towards me. The fact that they're worried that people might change their behaviour towards them is quite a big thing. Shazib, any thoughts on this stigma and mental health?
Yeah, I think, like you said, that stigma is prevalent within, and it's not just within the youth, it's within the adult community as well. And I think it's because people think if they open up and, as we said earlier, that they show that vulnerable side to them, that it makes them look weaker. It's a sign of weakness. And sometimes people may put it down to, it's because you don't have your trust in Allah. And then they make them think that they're doubting their iman and there's a weakness in their iman, where it's not, like I said, mental health. It's something that fluctuates, and sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, and that's what we need to address. That what we need to look at is that if you've got poor mental health, never think that it's permanent. It's never going to end. There's always a hope and a chance for it to improve.
Absolutely. We're recognising now, and I think, the very early comment about the madrasas as well, trying to tackle some of these issues. I think there is more of a conversation about mental health, but the stigma still exists. And, sometimes it is just about understanding what someone is going through. We've had a couple of comments come through. So, Uzair, Assalamu alaikum, he said. So, wa alaikum salam. Thank you for listening. And if you've got any comments, please do message and connect with us. And Salma has said, Salma Owen, well done for discussing this topic and engaging the young people. It is vital for them to speak out. So, don't underestimate what you guys are doing here in the studio today. It's incredible and actually really brave. Sana, when you're thinking about going to your friends for support, what things are you expecting from them?
I mean, I guess you don't expect your friends to be able to fix it. It's not something that can be fixed. It's something that takes time, but it's just having someone to talk to and open up to about it, and just having that support system there. They can just check in on you and just make sure, like, that if you've had a bad day, like Bashira said, just to talk to them about it.
And Dahir, do you think that's any different to what you'd expect from a conversation that you might have with a parent or another trusted adult? Do you think it's much different in terms of the expectations?
I think in terms of expectations, when you're with your friends, you feel like you can speak to them in a way that you want to speak to them. So it's not as if you have to have, obviously there has to be adab there, you have to respect your friends, but there's a way that you can open up about mental health. And when you're with your parents, there's a different way of speaking. I feel if you do struggle with mental health, there's different ways of when you speak with your friends and speak with your parents. I think it's just because when you open up to your friends, they can understand you because they might be in your shoes. They can understand you. When you're with your parents, obviously, like you speak, most of the issues come from social media. So they won't have understood what has happened with social media issues because they didn't deal with it when they were younger.
Wow. Every time you guys are sort of sharing your opinions, I'm just like, my jaw hits the floor because it's incredible, honestly, so insightful, and actually, a real maturity around this. And I think, the comments we had from, last week was a lot of parents recognize that, young people are perfectly capable of making good decisions and, really making the right choices to thrive in life. And often they just need that support. And I think at this point, it's worth making a bit of a point about how Right Direction can supplement some of that, creating a safe space for young people to come together and discuss issues in a healthy way and not rely on perhaps harmful sources of information that might make the situation a little bit worse. Obviously, you've always got your teachers at school that you can try and connect with. But one of the things I recognise when working with young people is that parents often say, do you know what, we just don't know how to have this kind of a conversation. It's too big, too scary, or too unknown, as Dahir highlighted, that we don't really understand what's going on in the lives of the children that in our homes sometimes. So anyway, so yeah, keep texting in. Make sure you ask if you've got any questions for the young people in the studio. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to take them. The number is 0774 8855 055. And if you've got any thoughts on what we've discussed so far, please share them, because again, this is a space for young people to really help other people understand what their world looks like. Okay, so Bashir, back to you then. So what kind of things make young people feel a bit worried, anxious, scared, or anything else that might trigger, a bit of a dip in their mental health?
I feel like it could be anything from like exam stress to like just sometimes home life. Like sometimes home life can be quite stressful for some people.
Yeah.
But it literally, for some people it could be like anything, any little thing. For other people it could be like bigger things. It's different for everyone.
So exam stress, I guess that is a huge one. And we see it kind of come in exam season, and stress is sky high, and obviously there's a lot more information available about how to manage some of those issues that you might face leading up to exams. Amira, anything else that you think young people might be worried about?
I think right now there's been a lot of scaremongering in the news, especially about the virus.
Right.
And for some young people that don't understand fully and can't understand fully, to be seeing constantly that there are loads of people dying in the world, and that the figures are getting worse and worse, or in some places, I think that also creates anxiety amongst young people as well. Yeah. Especially.
Yeah, and actually, the whole pandemic situation, it's been unknown to a lot of us. It's not just young people, actually. It's a lot of adults who are feeling equally stressed and worried. Let's bring in some of the guys. Dahir, anything else from your perspective, that you can share with us?
I think that in terms of going past, once you've dealt with the scaremongering, I think even the fact that just going and talking to someone about the situation and how they feel about the situation can help. So, for example, if you talk as in different countries are in different positions to deal with lockdown. So in Australia, they basically don't have a lockdown. So if on the news, it's weird, they don't show places like Australia that have dealt with the coronavirus well. I think you have New Zealand who have dealt with it well. Countries like that, they're not on the news. So I think it's also part in a role of society that they have to put out positive things so people can look at the positives, not always negatives.
Yeah, and actually, we talked about this last week, that social media can actually be a real source of anxiety for a lot of people, because, again, about getting the right level of information, accurate information, but also looking at other people and comparing. And I think you've made a really good point there, that sometimes we can look at other people and really sort of make some big judgments or assumptions about their lives and not realise actually that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's what we see, and actually deep down people are dealing with a whole load of stuff. Bashir, you made a point that each young person has their own experiences around what their stresses are. Exam seems to be a big one, but I guess there's things like peer pressure, wanting to fit in, that can be a source of anxiety for a lot of people. But also, Sana, have you got anything else to add to that? Something else that young people might be worried about?
I feel like most things have been touched on. Yeah. I don't really have much to add to that. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So we shall move on. And actually, when we start worrying about things, sometimes, like I said, that can just be the start of a whole range of emotions. It manifests in a whole load of different ways. And as adults, sometimes we don't recognize that, a young person that's feeling angry or frightened or a little bit nervous or sad, or sometimes overly happy. Shazib, you made the point that, people are overcompensating and pretend that nothing's happening. Sometimes these are small signals that something more might be going on, and it's always worth a conversation, because deep down someone might be feeling quite lonely or a little bit bored. That can be a source of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and it can sort of manifest in different ways. But so there's a lot of emotions alongside the physical symptoms that we recognise that affect young people. So Amira, what kind of things can we do to help us with our managing our well-being? You know, we know that there's certain things that we can do to release the happy chemical, endorphins. So what kind of things do we need to do to release them? Any ideas on that?
I think the obvious one is to talk to people about it. Talking to people about how you feel it feels like a weight off your shoulders sometimes. Yeah. Just to be able to, even if they're not giving you anything back, it's not more of I don't know how to explain it, but just to let it all out, basically.
Talking.
Not only that, but sometimes writing it down as well, like keeping a diary and stuff.
Yeah.
And just getting out that way. Sports and stuff as well can release endorphins and make you feel a lot better. Just being outdoors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Being outdoors is great. Speaking and talking, and I think, Shazid made this point very early on, that there's a recognition that we need to create safe spaces for young people to connect and discuss these issues. And I was going to make a point, but it's completely gone from my head. So I will move on to a comment. We've had a comment come through from Shaima. She's very proud of everyone involved in this conversation. It's great that, there's a recognition from the listeners out there. She said, sometimes people suggest you don't have enough iman or are not grateful enough, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I think it might be worth noting that the older generation have some source of education about mental health, so they feel invested in their child. As sometimes parents may feel insecure if their child is seeking support elsewhere, but also understanding that you have to support your child in what is best for them and not adding cultural baggage to the mix. I think you hinted towards this, Bashira, about, home environments can be quite stressful sometimes. But this is a perspective from an adult, I think. It is. And they're saying that sometimes parents might feel a little bit insecure that their child's going elsewhere.
I totally get that. My mom will constantly ask me questions about how I'm feeling, how I'm doing, if I'm seeking help elsewhere. But to that, I would just say that for me personally, I find it more comfortable talking to a stranger because that stranger does not know you. For me personally, it's nice to know that you care. It's loving. It's nice. With some parents, they completely write it off and they're like, no, you don't have anything wrong with you. It's just all in your head kind of thing. But with talking elsewhere, it's just the comfort of talking to a stranger, talking to someone who doesn't know you. Mm-hmm. Because it's you just feel less judged. Even though you completely you say that you won't judge us or anything, it's just the fact that talking to a stranger, you just feel less judged. It's a lot more comfortable in that sense.
No, and you know what? That's a really valid point that you're making. I think a lot of young people might be able to relate to that. And actually, we will sort of discuss this a little bit later in the show when we're rounding up about the advice for sort of parents and other trusted adults about having a conversation around this topic. Galeem, what kind of things do you do to keep you sort of positive and energized and help you manage your well-being?
So you can do things that you enjoy, you can read, or you can cut out unhealthy habits. Like Amira said, you can exercise, and you can do other things that you enjoy. Also, giving to charity helps boost your own self-esteem, and that helps a lot.
Wow, I love that, charity. And actually that just brings me on to, a lot of people might have already heard of the 5 ways to well-being, and there's a lot of research that's gone into it about how people can manage their well-being, mental health. One of the things is connecting, and we really have touched on that about speaking to someone, and speaking to someone new sometimes. That can be a really powerful thing, but really having a meaningful conversation with someone that can really help clear your mind. Being active, getting outdoors, but also playing football, or just hanging out with your friends and doing something that's using your body, I guess, rather than sitting in front of a screen, can help. But the other thing, aside from taking notice and being really mindful about what's happening and learning about, continuing to learning to do something new, trying something different, and really sort of pushing boundaries in terms of getting out your comfort zone. The other thing they mentioned was giving, and actually giving can be in a whole load of different forms. It can be like volunteering on the radio show, which is what you guys are doing, and that can be great for your mental health, but it can also be, giving to charity and an actual donation. And actually what they say is that when we commit to an act of kindness, whatever that is, at least once a week, then that's associated with an increase in well-being. And I think that's really powerful, and actually something else that's very much deep-rooted in our faith. So thank you for making that point, Kaleem. Love that. Okay, so Sana, I'm going to come to you then. When I think Amira mentioned this, that sometimes not necessarily talking, but writing things down. And I think when I was growing up, that was a big thing for me. My notepad became my best friend. And even now, I look at my ramblings and think, wow, things were quite complicated back then. But it was all good. It helped me manage my mental health, where I wasn't able to speak to some of my peers, mostly because I didn't feel that a lot of people had gone through what I'd gone through, a very early bereavement. So that was a big barrier for me. Sana, what's in your emotional first aid kit that you can sort of share with us when you're feeling a little bit angry, stressed, or upset? What kind of things are you doing?
I feel like there are so many things you can do. For me, I like watching a movie. Well, there's such things people call feel-good movies, and movies that make you laugh, the movies that make you feel better after you've watched them. So that's something that I feel like I do quite a lot. If I'm feeling down, I've just not had a great day, like that's something I would do. Yeah. Just to make me feel better. It picks you up because you're watching something that you've watched it multiple times, but it's still funny to you.
Yeah.
So that's something that I do.
Laughter is the best medicine.
Yeah.
My dad always says this, actually, when you laugh, there's a whole load of sort of like things that are happening inside of you that you don't even know, but the release of endorphins is definitely a great boost. Sometimes we need that little bit of extra energy. So, yeah, I can hear that. So, Shazib, what kind of things do you suggest for young people to sort of engage in when they're feeling a little bit stressed out?
I think one thing that's really important is that young people are able to identify the emotion that they're feeling within themselves. And research shows that 60% of young offenders have speech and language difficulties because they're not able to express themselves. So, for example, if somebody's feeling insecure, there's that goes, you've got a spectrum. So that could be somewhere from just like being nervous to feeling stressed out, helpless. But if they're just saying that they're feeling insecure, they can misunderstand themselves. So I think when you're expressing yourself and having that appropriate vocabulary, and when you do identify that feeling, for me personally, it's always then countering that with a positive. And for me, one thing that I can always go back to is like I might have this going on in my life at the minute, but I have a roof over my head, clothes on my back, I'm physically able. And it's looking at the small things that we take for granted every day. And for me personally, and my family, when we have these conversations, it's always these small things that we don't realize, but we've been blessed with so much. And when you weigh up the positives against the negatives, the positives generally outweigh them.
Wow. And actually this is it. I think, Dahi, you were making a point of this, and it links in with the 5 ways to well-being, but about taking notice and focusing on the positives, right? You've been suggesting this at the beginning, that sometimes we can get so focused on the doom and gloom and actually not recognize what's kind of sort of right before our eyes. What kind of things are you grateful for, Dahi?
I'm grateful that I have a family that I can speak to, friends that I can message at any time, and I know that they'll reply. I think one thing that people take for granted is the ability to, the power of your voice. Because when we speak, we can't take our words back. So if we've said something, then it's out there. So people have to almost respond to it. And if they ignore it, then you know that they're shying away from it. So when we speak to people about mental health, it's hard for them to shy away from replying, because they can see although we've got the courage to speak up about it, they can see you as cowardly. But I think it just comes down to the fact that when we speak, our voices are heard, and some people just need to hear that.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that really ties in well with the ethos of this show. We want to hear. I think there's a lot of adults that want to listen and hear what you guys have to say. And going back to what Shazib said, it's about being able to articulate that. Sometimes that's very difficult. So, Shazib, what's your advice to parents and any sort of adult listeners that are worried about this topic equally as much as you and I? What kind of things can they do to what's the word I'm looking for? actively engage in a conversation and encourage young people to be able to articulate their thoughts and their feelings?
I think with parents, it's a balancing act, because the parent always takes on that role as the leader and they're leading the family. But then what they also need to remember is it's so important that they develop that relationship with their child, and being approachable and having those conversations with their children. The children don't need to tell the parents everything, but it's just for the children to be reassured that their parents are there to support them. And I think for parents as well, it's you being that role model for your child, because I think as a parent myself, sometimes we strive for perfection in our children, but we're not perfect ourselves. So it's looking at the situation and within the lens of the child, really, and looking at what they're experiencing and being more understanding, I think. And like I said, validating their opinions and their voice and accepting them, and making sure they feel that their voice is being heard.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, there is a lot in that actually about being, creating a non-judgmental space. Bashir, you made this point that sometimes, you don't want to, it's easier to talk to a stranger because it's a lot more objective. They're not, there's not the extra stuff. They just see what's in front, and you can sort of speak in an open, honest way. And actually, there's lots of ways that parents can support their young people. And I know that I have a lot of conversations with people around me about sometimes identifying some of the early signs, and then, not being so obvious, not just going straight in saying, hey, what's up with you? You seem a bit off, but actually just starting off with some really gentle questions. How's your day been? How's your friend so-and-so? Taking an interest. I think that's the key thing, building up that trust so that eventually that drive home from school can be a really nice place to connect with a young person and start reflecting on the day. We've had some comments through. So Salam's hats off to the youth on keeping the show. Sorry, let me start again. Salam's hats off to the youth on the show, keeping it real, not just giving answers related to religion, watching a movie to clear your head, and then is like an emoji with yep, that's a good one. Another comment, understanding that no one is perfect and going easy on yourself. A big, big reminder, please, parents, listen, I'm going to say that again. Nobody's perfect. Go easy on yourself. We're all in this together. And I think, Shazid made a really big point around this, that it is about bringing all of that, every sort of support network that young person has, bringing it into and coordinating that so they get the best support they need. A comment from Fatima Marafani, great topic, much needed. So proud of all of our young speakers, mashallah. That's amazing, thank you. And for recognizing, I get nervous every time before the show, and these guys just make it look so much more easier, so... incredible. Okay, let's go back to the support and advice then. Who am I going to pick on? I'll pick on Amira. Amira, what are the barriers that young people might face when they are going to their parents, relatives, or even like a doctor or youth worker or a counselling support service or something like this? What kind of things might stop someone from engaging in a conversation?
I think when it comes to your parents in particular, I think you just... might not expect them to understand. I think that there's the potential that they could say for a number of reasons, like almost blaming it on you. And I can see why people would find it difficult to talk to their parents about something like that, or they might just shrug it off and because not a lot of people fully understand mental health. When it comes to other people like youth work, youth workers, it could be the doctor, it could be relatives, any other adult that you might go to. What are the barriers there, do you think? Again, I just think it might be embarrassment, that you feel like you have to go to a doctor to talk to you about it.
Embarrassment.
And
Galeem, do you have any thoughts on this? What advice would you give to the adult listeners from a young person point of view about making that conversation easier? What would help young people engage?
Okay, so I think it'd be better for adults to have open conversations with their children, and if they encourage them to talk about how they feel and they had more emphasis on this, you could have even not just parents, but like in madrasas as well. It's possible that our appas and molanas could be trained in mental health and mental health first aid, and they'll be able to connect with their youth more, and they'd get them.
Wow. Yeah, so look, you've heard it here. You know, there's a recognition from the adults that, you know, they want to engage in conversations, and sometimes it's a bit heartbreaking when their young person is going somewhere else for support. And actually, you know, young people want this as well. They want to be able to talk about these issues with their parents and other trusted adults in their lives, and about opening up that conversation. Shazib, any sort of we've got last 5 minutes, any sort of final thoughts about this, you know, issue, about conversations and having meaningful conversations?
So something that just came to me now was that we were talking earlier, and that mental health is a natural part of our life as human beings. And in Islam, it teaches as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, there's two particular verses in Surah Miraj. He said, indeed, man was created anxious. And in Surah Baqarah, he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we will test you with fear, hunger, loss of wealth, and lives and fruits. We give glad tidings to the persevering and the patient. So this is part of what we have to experience. And so that's why definitely there shouldn't be a stigmatism there, because this is part of our journey. And I think as parents, it's like I said, it's that having that relationship with your child, having that quality time with your child, and doing something with them that's not necessarily for a purpose, and just having that recreational time with them. I think it kind of gives them that feeling as well of that mutual respect, because that's what, like I said earlier, that's what they're looking for. That young people, they want to be accepted as young adults. Have a bit of fun. Have a bit of fun with your young people. Yeah. We've had a comment come through from Munira Khatri. She said, "Listen to your children, talk to them, and become their best friend as a parent." Wow. I think that's every parent's aspiration, to be their child's best friend. And you know, there is, you know, I wouldn't underestimate how big a challenge it is, especially in this day and age of trying to support your own children through some of this big scary world sometimes. But let's not focus on the negatives, let's focus on the positives. The reality is there are support networks out there, and a big reinforcement. A big message to the young people that don't be afraid to talk. There's always going to be someone there. And, you know, sometimes parents are equally sort of distressed about how challenging this conversation can be. And so they don't necessarily, it might not be a case of they don't want to help, they just don't know how to. But, you know, the first step is starting with a conversation and really sort of engaging when you see those little signs that your mom or your dad or some other adult is trying to find out a bit more about how you're doing. In that whole process, you can quite easily support other people around you, and that's when you can be the friend in need, you know, and support your friends when they need someone to talk to. So it's really, really important that we keep talking. Last few minutes again, you know, hopefully we can. We just touched on this topic. It's huge, and we didn't have much time to start with. But let's keep the conversation going in our homes and use this as a time to really connect and ask the right questions and really identify what's causing the stress in young people's lives. And, you know, just back to sort of the supplementary stuff, you know, we've got Shazib, again, long-time advocate, really wanting to create some safe spaces for young people to discuss topics. If you want to find out a bit more about his work, he is on Instagram and Facebook, and it is rightdirection. What's the word? YP, is it? YM, sorry, apologies. I've got loads of notes. For youth mentoring, yes.
Youth mentoring. So rightdirection.ym, youth on Facebook and on Instagram. And hopefully, you know, there'll be some chances for young people to participate in some group discussions, but also there might be some one-to-one work available. So last few minutes then, and, you know, we've done really well today. I think we've covered a lot, and there's been some really useful things that have come out of it. Dahir, what advice would you give to young people in just a couple of sentences? You've taken part in this show, and it's been amazing to hear what you have to say. What would you like to say to all the listeners out there?
My advice would be speak to people, friends, family, and also remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has everything in control. And just the fact that if you pray namaz, just when you say Allahu Akbar, just means God is great, and it just shows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything that will happen to you, and it's just He knows that everything will be it's all in Allah's hands. You can't change everything. It's all in Allah's hands. Everything that will happen is written.
MashaAllah. Key message there. You are never really alone, right? and that's true. And I think, you know, Shazib and I, when we were talking earlier before the show, it was about really understanding sometimes how, you know, the du'as that we make, if we really understand it, we can really transform them into positive affirmations to make ourselves feel better. We've got last 30 seconds, and I just wanted to say that, look out for the warning signs. If at any point you find that things are getting a little bit too hard to cope with, deep sadness, or you're just losing interest in life, or you're trouble with sleeping and eating, please reach out and get some support. There is advice on the NHS websites, but another site that I'd recommend is youngminds.org, and encourages both adults and young people as well to have a conversation. Just wanted to say thank you to all our young people for engaging in such a difficult topic, and all our listeners. Assalamu alaikum.